上面那个擦吗？
That's the time of day.
Yeah, I can imagine, busy man like you
It's been
here.
since 6 a.m. Second day in a row, 6 a.m. to like 11 p.m.
And usually you are London-based or
New
you're
York-based.
New York-based also. You still have the time. Oh.
OK，好，我这边4点半。
好的呀。你等一下，我那个什么，我提纲，然后再那个什么。So,
please, you can just
look at you.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're gonna test a little
Okay,
with the
certainly.
voice, but why don't we start with the trust barometer? For this year, what strikes you the most from the barometer survey?
So I think the most striking outcome of the Edelman Trust Barometer is the disparity between how people are feeling. The informed public are very positive for the most part around the world, and then the mass population are feeling quite left behind. So despite broad economic prosperity, there's just this huge social divide that's going to make moving society difficult going forward.
And it's globally.
It is global. And it's absolutely keenly felt in developed markets, so continental Europe, US, UK, where there is genuine disconnect between the informed and the mass population, but even developing markets. You see China, there's a 13-point difference between trust in the institutions we study, between the informed public who are at 90 and the mass population in China at 77. So still very trusting in China, but still there's a delta and a gap between those who feel like things are really going well and those who are concerned.
Why that happened? Have you?
Well, it's a host of things, but I think what we see for the most part is there's a rising concern about, will my family be as well off in 5 years as they are today? And the majority of people feel not. And in fact, in China, there was a 6-point decline in that answer to that question. So I think that's, in China, it's an acknowledgement of slowing growth. And then globally, uncertainty about the role of technology in all of our lives. Will it cause job loss? Will there, automation result in loss of jobs? Artificial intelligence? And are people being properly reskilled for the jobs of the future? So I think globally, people are feeling that pressure. There's a rising skepticism about the pace of innovation, and if it's in service of us as individuals, or is it in service of business? Which leads to another big takeaway from the Trust Barometer this year. 56% of those we surveyed, and that's 34,000 people around the world, believe that capitalism is doing more harm than good. And therefore, I think that's why you see people in the streets in France. You see, strikes in England in the transportation space. They're just not feeling that their wages are keeping up with the cost of living.
And do you have a solution for all of these problems?
Well, I think there are partnership's a big piece of it. So business is now the most trusted institution around the world. That puts a lot of pressure on business as a community to advance and address some of these issues. But also partnership with government. Partnership with media, incredibly important. Government has a role to help move their communities and societies forward, but they probably would do it better if they partnered with business on the reskilling, the education of workers, and ensuring that fair wages are being paid to people. The other piece of the trust dynamic is the interdependency between competence, business fulfilling the promise on its product and services, so really delivering. So that's competence. And then the other side of the equation that's actually more important to consumers is ethics. Have you done what you do properly with an ethical mindset and a framework around that? That's, I think that the fair dealing is very important and always has been, but the role of ethics in the development of technology is now more important than ever.
Exactly. And you talked about China. How about the things in the state? Do you still remember the Brits?
So this U.S. statistics are significantly different than China.
Oh.
China is the most trusting country in the world of the four institutions we study: business, government, NGOs, and media, at 88%. And so
Good to hear.
that's the third year in a row that China's been number
Okay.
one. The U.S. is in neutral territory, both at the general population level. It's in trusting for informed, so I believe the number is somewhere in the low 70s. And then it's a significant double-digit gap amongst mass population, not feeling very positive about the future. And I think the U.S. is representative of a lot of the developed markets where there really is this concern about the upper end disproportionately benefiting from economic prosperity and it not being played down. I think in the U.S. as well, there's concerns about the cost of education, access to health care, and just in general a host of challenges that cause people not to feel very good about the future.
This is very interesting because, during this forum, we did a lot of interviews with investment bankers and policymakers. Given what happened last year on the U.S. capital market and the economy, it's just booming. And although there's a twist in it, but still, we feel 2020 would be a very good year for the state in terms of economic development and things like that. But still, your survey
isn't bearing it out.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's why we talk about this sort of disparity between very good economic times and people not feeling positive. And I do think that's an instance where the average American's living wage has been stagnant now for many years. And it's why you see companies stepping forward. Taco Bell in the U.S. has made a move that all of its store managers make $100,000 a year. That's a significant commitment on the part of that company. And you have multiple companies, looking at not just hitting minimum wage, but actually a living wage, because minimum wage does not enable a family to live. So that's, I think, a big reflection of why we see the loss of trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you think the business community can have the solution for this?
They already are. I think we see business leaders and CEOs in particular speaking up. 92% of the people that we survey look to CEOs to address social inequity, working wage, environmental issues, reskilling for the workforce, and helping their workers be prepared for tomorrow. So you see that happening. It would be more effective, and I think the societies would move forward if it was done in partnership with government.
And I noticed that in the survey there's this, as you mentioned, the distrust on technology. And what do you think that the big companies like GAFA should do in order to actually improve that kind of situation? So
for me, it's the technology industry needs to be all about transparency. If there's a concern about innovation, and they innovate on their product, they need to be very open about what it is that they were doing. I think a significant number of the folks we surveyed are concerned that innovation isn't in their interest, it's in the company's interest. And so that they would like to see companies be more transparent about, how are they managing my data? How are they using, facial recognition to open my phone? Is it just for that purpose? And can they be quite confident that that's all it's for? So it's that balance of the competence piece, doing it well, delivery of product well, and the ethical piece of managing technology for good and being responsible about technology. I think, a lot of technology companies need to think about how deep is ethical behavior being drilled into their organizations. Do programmers have an ethical framework when they go about programming and coding, and how their product might be used for consumers and with consumers and by consumers?
But in the EU they have GDPR. But do you think in the state next year, this year you are going to have something nearly or merely similar?
Not at a national level. I think, the premise of getting something significantly passed in Congress it won't happen because it's an election year.
Yeah.
I think California is advancing
Yes.
regulations that are as strong, if not maybe in some instances more current and strong than GDPR. New York State's begun to do that as well. So I think you may see pockets of states advancing. We will need a national standard at some juncture. I think what Singapore has done from a framework perspective, they've done quite an advanced framework in partnership with business to create some standards around technological innovation and the management of data and privacy.
That's good to hear. I hope that because in China and the state actually they have different standards of data and transfer of data. If you know that if there's the local storage, I don't remember the
local
the
storage.
term. Yeah,
yes.
Local storage of data is a big issue actually for those two countries.
Yes.
Yes.
And it'd be wonderful to get to a global standard, but I think that's probably not likely.
No, it's your election year and the phase 2. We don't know when that could be finished, but I think. Do you usually also pay attention to the China and U.S. Negotiations?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think about it? The current result. Are you you're positive about what is?
Well, as long as all sides are speaking to one another, there's progress. And I think, while this week's advance or the signing last week, I think, is representative of continued conversation and progress. I think the sense is that everything's tentative,
Yes.
and we need more certainty.
Yeah, exactly. But do you think this phase 1 can bring certainty to the U.S. business community, or do you think it's not so sure?
I think it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, that's very good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I've
Absolutely.
went through all my list.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah. Way ahead of the schedule. So
Okay.
Because you
You
talk.
got what you needed?
Yeah, and you talk really fast, so
I'm
it's
sorry
really
about that.
no.
It was too
No,
fast.
I mean fast is good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I always am told, speaks more slowly. But-
No, I think U.S. prefer fastest talkers like speakers.
Oh, yeah. Well, I talk slowly relative to my children.
Oh, really?
I have a daughter who I'm like, would you please slow down?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she talks so fast.
Because my teacher, my professor, he's American, and I talk slowly. And when I talked to him, he said, if you want to make it in the state, you must talk fast. Otherwise, people will think you are. So,
It's sadly probably true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
All
so
right,
much.
thank you so much. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
OK。
好。